Our first presenter is Judy Stubblefield, and she works with our county with PBIS. She's our lead there. So if you are at a PBIS school, you will probably see her around. She also works with our bully prevention, looking at our student support services. And so today she's just going to talk to you a little bit about our students, any dangerous behaviors you may see, communicating with them effectively. And so I am going to turn it over to her.
All right, thank you. I think my mic is on. Good morning and welcome, and all of these freshly minted brand new teachers, and we're just glad to have you, and at the end of the year we'll be glad you're fully traumatized. So welcome on board. I'm going to ask just a few questions. I kind of want to get to know you. She only said I had 2 jobs, but you know, like I told my son, you know, I feel like Jamaican because I have 5 jobs, man. You know, between PBIS and bullying. Let's see, how many of you middle school people? Raise your hand. Okay, so you'll see me because I also am an advisor to all the ISS programs in the district. Mindset, how many of you are EC teachers? Okay, so then your administrators, I make sure they get trained so you can know how to take them down. So, so those are just some of the things we do. I do, as well as dealing with the students who may end up applying for transfers because they have experienced bullying or some other negative impacting behaviors on a campus, and they are now requesting to be transferred. So, how many high school people we have in here? Yeah, you know, the boyfriend, girlfriend, he acts like a fool, he gets arrested, then they have to be separated. You know, yeah, we have to split them up. Grown folk stuff already, right? So anyway, I welcome you, and I'm glad you are here with us. A little background on me. I've been here for 4 years now. I came up here from Austin, Texas. I worked at Austin ISD for a number of years, and I've worked in, this is my 5th district, 4th state, and so forth. AP in Ohio and counselor and around places like that. I always say I'm just trying to outrun the warrants. I'm a former police officer, and so, you know, they say if you come out of Texas, you know, you gotta have something wrong with you. So anyway, how many people are from North Carolina? Raise your hand. Oh, hands down, you Carolina people. Let me hear some places where the rest of you are from. If you're not from North Carolina, stand up. All right, woo! Here we go, go ahead. New Jersey. I used to work at Port Jervis out of New York when I worked with kids out of Harlem. You? New Jersey. All these Jersey people. South Jersey, oh yeah. Whole different story. Florida, oh that's right, you told me, yeah. She was complaining about our heat. Florida girl, okay. From Port Jervis. Oh, good. Most people don't know where Port Jervis is. Got you. Got the Jersey people over here. We're going to have to call FBI. Do some. They have people there. Massachusetts. Very good. Okay. Not involved with those Jersey people. The New York girls. Delaware. Is that still a state?
New York.
All right. God, we're just pulling it all guys from, okay. Houston. See, my son worked at NASA. Why are you sitting down? Worked at NASA, and then, you know, those other people in those other states said, no, we don't need that anymore. So then all the scientists had to go someplace else. So he's single still, but anyway. Just from Virginia. Okay, Carolina people, let's give them a welcome. Thank you. Well, I'm gonna just give you a quick overview about something that's important for you to know. You know, the other side of that is that when people complain about principals or teachers or something like that, and, you know, a parent may contact somebody they know on the board, and before you know it, that person did this to my child, and they bullied my child. Sometimes I show up, I'm that person Just got to do that. So let me show you a little bit where to find whatever this is. Sometimes I have to dig around. So you go here, and let's see if I think we need to go over here to divisions. I tried to find it the other day, and then this is where we are, down near the bottom, student support services. Click on there, and then if you go over here this year, they finally put it over here, Greenblatt Act, and there it is. So that's the thing that I came here to talk to you about. They need to take my name off of that because I don't want to get accused of it. So anyhow, this is the law. I'm not going to read it to you. You can read, but I want you to make sure you go back and take a look at what it says. How many people are, since a lot of you are North Carolina people, how many of you are familiar with this law, the Greenblatt law? Okay, we don't want you going to jail, that's all. That's how I make it easy. So this deals with restraint, seclusion, and isolation of students. Basically, I'm saying don't duct tape them, lock them up, or put them down in a hog tie. So here we go. Restraint and seclusion, isolation of students, we use those here, but we use them in a legal and appropriate manner. And you may use reasonable force, you know, that big fight in the classroom. Rather than trying to restrain some people, just do a classroom clear. Let your AP know. They'll call whoever they need to call. Who you gonna call? So, and then we go on to talk about the responsibility Central Office Administration to develop procedures requiring the following. So this is why Ms. Kearns drafts me each year, but I understand this year they're recording me and taking my pictures for follow-ups for new employees. So we're going to go over these things: physical restraint and how it's defined, seclusion and how it's defined, isolation, how it's defined. And then what I did was just pulled out all the policy to let you know, because sometimes in various other professions, they may have trainings and so forth that are related to a broad, more general national way of addressing something, but the agency you work for, it's the policy that matters a lot, because that's the only thing that's going to protect you as you apply your particular skills in that particular trade. So the law is one thing, but make sure you're clear on the policy of the agency that you work for, and your agency is New Hanover County Schools. So the information based on this particular House bill, and this came about as a result of people having some problems on how they address the restraint or the physical containment of students. And about everything that we're going to talk about in this law is a result of something that happened, okay? So the objectives is to obtain awareness of the House bill and its requirements. And what does it have to do with dangerous behaviors? And it comes out of a child advocacy particular position of saying that we need to make sure that our children are protected. But by creating the law, we also protect our teachers and our school administrators as we may deal with children who have challenging behaviors. So it's designed to keep both staff and students safe in a school environment, and it provides the guidelines for the staff and the training requirement. So the Greenblatt law came about as a result of Deborah Greenblatt. She was an attorney, and she was an advocate for children in the state of North Carolina. She passed away due to breast cancer before the law became enacted in North Carolina. And so that is why it is called the Greenblatt law, in honor of this diligent, hardworking child advocate. And she represented clients in special ed, disputes, fair housing cases, class action suits. She was one of those social justice kind of advocates that I always will admire. I think that when we lose more humanity in our world, we lose that level of compassion that makes it safe for all of us. And so I think it's so appropriately that this law is called the Greenblatt law. So here we go with physical restraint. We're going to talk about 3 or 4 areas of restraint. So in the physical restraint, what is it? Holding a student in a chair? I said sit down. That kind of thing. Grabbing the student by the arm, come over here. And pinning the student up against the wall. You're not police officers. You do not have to pat them down and take them down. and physically hold a student, wrap your arms around them, and so forth. So, so those are the kinds of things that I'm going to switch over. You have the PowerPoint here, right? Let me switch over because I think it's a little bit better than the PDF. Oops. No, as Ed Modo. Okay, so we'll stick with this. And so, so those are the things that define it. So physical restraint means the use of physical force to restrict the free movement of all students, part of a student, or part of a student's body. So, okay. And this tells you the conditions under which, or the circumstances under which you can use reasonable use of force or physical restraint. And it says, I'm going to get real specific about this, as reasonably needed to obtain possession of a weapon or other dangerous objects on the person or within the control. Now, usually you don't have to deal with anything like that, because imminent danger situations, if you have a kid in your room with a weapon, if you can do a room clear, get your kids out of there and get yourself out of there, that's what you do. So, but we really don't want you acting like FBI candidates and taking anybody down and trying to kick out any guns and knives out of their hands, okay? All right. So, how many of you are prior military or current reserve? Okay, so you know what I'm talking about. Don't do it here, okay? Just teach them, you know. As reasonably needed to maintain order or prevent or breakups or fights and things like that. Needed for self-defense, those kind of things, ensure safety of students. So those are just the very clear specifics about physical restraint. So what does this all mean? So except as, except as set forth in the law, physical restraint of students should be considered as a reasonable use, should not be considered a reasonable use of force when used solely as a disciplinary measure. I went through training with Judge Corpening here, who is a 5th District Court judge supervisor, and he brought in Judge Teskey, who helped to develop a program down in Georgia to limit the number of kids who were accelerating to the school-to-prison pipeline. And he said that most children end up having problems in school, you know, from a written referral to a criminal charge or so forth, because there are POAs. You know what POAs are? Pissed off adults. And so you cannot contain or restrain children because you get ticked off. That wouldn't be a reasonable use of force. So I think that's kind of clear. And let me tell you, y'all looking at me, judging me, y'all gonna get pissed off before it's over. Physical restraint by law enforcement is lawful, and the exercise of their duties is not prohibited. So you don't have to call 911 out of your classroom. As you will know, you call administrators, you don't call SROs. We've had SROs say, you know, the teacher called me out of the classroom because a kid had a hat on backwards. It happened. I mean, that happened in this district and probably one of the schools where you're teaching, but I'm not going to tell you which one. So, so the bottom line is this. The use of physical restraint is prohibited except in situations as described in this law. And I think that that's probably where most problems come, because the rest of this stuff is a little bit weird, and I just hope you don't start doing any of this. So mechanical restraint. Keep your handcuffs at home, okay? Duct tape, all that stuff, y'all, the fuzzy, all that, keep that at home. So what is mechanical restraint? Handcuffs, prone stander, place some seat belt, you know, don't bring your jump rope, do any tie downs and things like that. So basically it says this, is that when properly used as assistive technology, and so some of the, if you're EC and you have children with severe disabilities and they're in wheelchairs or in prone standards and things like that, you cannot use that as a disciplinary measure, so it only can be used for the purpose that it was designed. And so this goes into talking into detail about that. So the bottom line is, the use of mechanical restraint is prohibited except in situations described in this law. So including the tying, taping, or strapping down of a student shall not be considered to be a reasonable use of force, and its use is prohibited. The short and simple of that is y'all can't do it. That's Southern New York, New Jersey. Y'all can't do it. Okay, so seclusion. Now, I came up here from Austin ISD and Houston. Seclusion is a result of something that happened in Houston about 20 years ago. Broom closet, janitor's closet, teacher, child, boom, shut. Yeah, it happened. It wasn't her fault. It just happened in her city. She said, that's so embarrassing. That woman has no filter. But it's early, you know. You guys need to wake up. You're eating all this sugar. You're going to be sleepy in 10 seconds, you know. Got to do what I get. She puts me on first. Now I got to go deal with bus drivers. So what is seclusion? Placed in a seclusion room. It means that the confinement of a student alone in an enclosed space from which the student is physically prevented from leaving or incapable of leaving due to physical or intellectual capacity. Don't do it to even your principals and your APs. So seclusion of a student by school personnel is permissible under the following situations. Now, you may have talked about room clears. You know, we didn't have these conversations 25 and 30 years ago when I was 15. Because we didn't have school shootings in the 80s and the 70s, 60s. Okay, I'm not going to tell too much. But this is a reality for you. Your life, your generation, is that you now have to have some idea of how to address a situation if you have a kid with a weapon. And so this law, it says, it's reasonably needed to respond to a person in control of a weapon or other dangerous object. That would be one of the permissible ways of why you could use seclusion for self-defense. You know, that kind of thing. I am very proud of our military. My son is third-generation military. My daughter and I have both been cops and all that kind of stuff. We serve our country. We love it. And I think that one of the things that our military bring to our students is an appreciation for what it looks like to be hands-on with an American soldier. So thank you. I think we really need to give them a hand. And so here it is, the bottom line of this. The use of seclusion is prohibited except in the situations described in the law. You can go back and take a look of what I need to do. You know, coming from a police background, quad military type of training, you think about things about when you walk in a room, where are the exits? I mean, now you got to do it when you go to the movie theater. But you really have to go into your room with an assessment for safety. So where would I move? Where would I go if this happened? Play some scenario. Don't get paranoid and don't get all freaky and weird, but just begin to think through, what would I do when you think about some of the most current situations that have happened on our school campuses. So do give yourself that kind of mind. When you have people around who have a background, or you got a daddy or uncle or a cousin or a sister or brother, and they come from a law enforcement or military background, ask them, come help me decorate my room one day. Get some input. Utilize those resources for how to keep yourself and your students safe. Unfortunately, that is just the reality that we live in now. So isolation. So what is isolation? Behavior management technique. Placed in isolation means a behavior management technique in which a student is placed alone in an enclosed space from which the student is not prevented from leaving. We do have legally defined, physically designed isolation spaces on our campuses, and so you know about those, but there are restrictions on how those are used. Not because somebody was fussing at you. Not that mouthy little 7th grader. You know, those little boys. Mess with the men sometimes. So what does it mean? It's permitted as a behavior management technique provided that the isolation space is appropriately lighted, ventilated, or heated, or cooled. And so the bottom line is that the use of isolation is permitted as long as the space utilized meets the requirements. And if you're not in a special ed situation, this would not be a room you will be using. If you're a general ed teacher, isolation is off the table for you. Okay, so timeout. So timeout, it means a behavior management technique in which a student is separated from other students for a limited period of time in a monitored setting. So the bottom line is timeout is permitted. It's not permitted when you cannot supervise a child. Some people have put kids outside their door, shut the door. Oh, kids, we're happy now. It is out the door. Be careful about that, about how it's used, and making sure that the child is provided some supervision. From the prospect of what that does to a child mentally and emotionally, to be separated and segregated out, you may be given a message to other students that, see, this one's a problem. And so it's okay when you say mean things to this one over here. When children's dignity is not left intact, when they're humiliated, when their discipline issues are addressed in a very public way, it really sets them up to be victims of bullying. And so please be mindful of how you employ this particular behavior management technique. I would say this would probably be at the very end of your use of behavior management techniques. One of the things that we used to do in Texas, I was in Denton and in Austin, sometimes we would create, by being, you know, in that, Texas is its own country, first of all. It's 16 hours tip to tip, 15 hours side to side. So, I mean, that's its own country. I remember running to a pilot from France, and he was saying, this is too big down out here, you know, this country's it's a different country. And so, but the thing is that, so we didn't have the beach, the ocean, you know, down at Galveston, down south of Houston, you know, they've got it, in Corpus Christi, they've got the Gulf, but it's not like that big blue ocean out there. So some of the teachers who were very creative, they would create the beach in their classroom. They'd take a big umbrella and they'd have a little mat. You know people who did, exactly. They'd have a mat, they might paint a palm tree, they might have beach shells and things over in a corner, along with maybe a little futon or something like this, you know, a little beanbag chair. And they would allow students to go earn time to be over there as a reward. But also, they could cover that by letting kids who were emotionally exhausted and had some times that they needed to be separated from others go over there too. So the space they used in timeout was visible from wherever they were in the classroom, and it was not used only as, it was used as a reward and as possibly a redirection center rather than just a penalty zone. So you may want to get creative about how you create a space, because you're going to have children, big ones and little ones, who will need time to recapture their emotional constraint. And so that might be something that you want to give some thought to. And talk to Tracy. So aversive procedures, here we go. Things you cannot do. Read over this one. The use of aversive procedures in public schools is prohibited. So it just goes into a great deal talking about systemic physical or sensory intervention program for modifying the behavior. Don't bring your cattle prods to school. Any of that kind of stuff. Serious foreseeable long-term psychological impairment. Some of you are working in schools where kids are coming to you already with PTSD. They've been traumatized, not just last year or 2 months ago or 6 years ago, but because they come to you traumatized because last night daddy went to jail, or so the neighbor got shot, or because there's domestic violence and their dad's a local doctor and they don't want anybody else in the city to know it. Those children are all in your classrooms. Poverty and lack of economic resources alone will not define trauma with children. You know, you've got kids coming from the nice religious family, and there's molestation going on at home. And they come in designer clothes and might drive a BMW on your campus. So getting a broader picture of what a traumatized child might look like is very important. And so when you establish those relationships, you may want to have surveys or interviews with them. You might want to do the 2 and 10. 2 minutes a day over 10 days to get to know your children. Get to know who it is that you're serving, who your customers are, And that way, when you establish those kind of relationships, those children develop a sense of a duty to you, and they can be accountable to you. And that will go a long way. If you can touch that heart of the child, getting a butt in a seat is no problem. They will learn from you. And so what does this mean? Use of aversive procedures is prohibited. Other information reporting and reporting tools. So if there's ever the use of any type of containment, mindset, restraint procedures, the person on your campus, your administrators know how to follow out with the paperwork, and you have to sign off on some things if you have received that training for physical restraint, but the most that you will be using and you will be trained on will be de-escalation techniques, verbal de-escalation. So these are what some of the tools look like, because parents have to know whenever this. And then it talks about liability limits. If you're doing what you're supposed to do, we're going to take care of you, that you're going to get mindset training. Each school site has a mindset trainer, and usually the assistant principal, they're responsible for scheduling, providing training, so you'll get your mindset training, at least verbal de-escalation. The EC people, I think you will get the physical restraint. And so there's more about the House Bill 1032 that you can find here. And wasn't that painless? Let me share a little something with you that I always like to leave people with. I'm going rogue now.
I can remember an occasion when two of my students were fighting at school. I mean, they were going at it on the playground. And at the elementary level, children who are fighting have a tendency to get really angry at each other. And if they're little boys, they puff up, because that means you're really tough. And so they were all puffed up, you know. And when I got them to the office, I asked them a terrible question. I said, "What happened?" Well, they really huffed up then, and that's really probably the worst question you could ask, because when you ask what happened, you're never going to get an accurate story. And so I said, "Okay, you go first." Well, the story gets very loud. I don't know why, but when kids are explaining, the story's loud. You may have noticed that. So I said, "Okay, Jack, what happened?" He said, "Well, see, we was playing. Everybody was playing." It's important to include everyone so you're not in trouble by yourself. And he said, "We was kicking. Everybody was kicking. And then he kicked my cousin. And my mama said," I said, "Stop right there," because I knew we were getting into a hidden rule, the mama rule. You see, there's mama law and there's public law. No law overrides mama law. Did you know that? If you didn't know, that's a hidden rule you must remember. When your mama says it, it becomes engraved in stone. So I knew what he was going to tell me. I said, "Your mama said if somebody hits you, hit him back, right?" And he said, "Right. And my mama said if somebody messed with anybody in my family." I said, "Okay, I know the rule. Stop right there." So I asked him, I said, "Where's your mama work?" And he forgot he was supposed to be huffed up, and he said, "At the telephone company." And I asked the other little boy where his mom worked, and he said, "At Prudential." He was still puffed up. And I said, "Okay, your mom works at the telephone company. Your mom works at Prudential. Did your mom say you could fight telephone company?" "Yes, ma'am." She said, "Bust them up." And I said, "Did your mom say you could fight?" "Yes, ma'am. She told me to defend myself." I said, "All right, we got the rules straight." And they said, "Are we suspended?" I said, "Absolutely, because that's my rule. If you fight at school, you get to go home for 2 days." Well, they were pretty upset with me by this time. I said, "But we have to do some things first." He said, "What do we have to do?" I said, "Well, first, we're going to go to the telephone company." And their eyes got real big. Because one of the hidden rules about working is that you don't bother your parents on their jobs. And first he said, "Are you going to call our mamas?" I said, "No, I'm going to take you over there." And they said, "Oh, no." By this time, the huff and puff was gone out of both of them. I said, "This is how it's going to work. First, we're going to the telephone company, and we're going to fight at the telephone company. I want you to tear up the telephone company. Roll on the floor, kung fu kick, just like you were doing here. But don't hurt each other too badly, because we're going to leave the telephone company and we're going over to Prudential. We're going to fight at Prudential. You can really fight over there. That's the last stop. You can make blood, pull hair, snatch each other's clothes off. I can run you by the hospital, get anything broken, set in a cast, push your eyeball back in your head. Then you can begin serving your 2-day suspension. They said, Miss Pearson, you know we can't fight on our mama job. I said, why not? Your mama made the rule. Let's go where your mama is. They said, oh, we're dead. We're not going to make it. And they just fired. I said, go sit on the blue seats outside my office while I call your parents. Tell them we're on our way. Get some boxing strategy in place so you'll know how you're going to fight once we get there. Oh, they were so sad. They just drug out of there. Well, first of all, you know I wasn't going to take those kids to their parents. But it was the first time I used a strategy that I've never used before, but I've used a lot since, and it has never failed me. When I called each parent, what I said was, I respect the rules you make for your children at home. You see, there's been a misconception that people who have children don't always make the right decisions about their kids. You see, parents make decisions for their children based on what they know, what they feel will make them safe. And it is not our place to say what they do is wrong. It's our place to say maybe we can add a set of rules that they don't know about. So I began both conversations by saying how much I respected their decisions that they were making for their children, and would they help me. I said, I know you made rules for home, and I promise not to interfere with those, but I need some help. I have 1,200 children in this building, and I have to keep all of them safe. And if everybody fought because their mom said they could, all the children here would be in trouble or hurt. Will you help me? I've never had a parent to tell me no. And I believe it's because I preface it by saying, I respect the rules you've made. And what I give the kids, in addition to their parents, is an opportunity to develop a second set of rules. Many times, to explain this point even further, I've asked parents, would you go on your job and punch a coworker because they disagreed with you? And of course, most of them said, no way. And I asked why, and they said, we'd lose our jobs. And I said, and I want kids to understand that the same concepts apply on their job, which is school. So we need to learn different ways of handling conflict, because fighting is not always an option. 2 sets of rules, 1 set of rules for home, another set of rules for school.
So that really kind of ties into my whole thing about biculturalism. And Dr. Rita Pearson was from Houston, and you're probably very familiar with her work, and she passed away not too long ago. She had cancer. But the thing is that remember what she said about children coming to you with 2 sets of rules. Oftentimes on your PBIS campuses, I talk about coming with home culture and a school culture. Our children are coming to us bicultural. There's a culture that they operate in at home that may be different from the school culture. My kids, your kids, they're raised with a very overlapping culture, because you know, we have set bedtimes, we have the way you engage with adults. There's certain social skill things that are pretty much common in educated middle-class families. And so when your children come with a greater experience of home culture that overlaps with school culture, you end up with fewer behavior issues. I thank you so much. I hope you have a good year. I'll be seeing some of you on your campuses, and all the best to you.
Thank you, Judy. Thinking about the difference in home culture and school culture, just talk among your table groups right now. Take about 30 seconds.